Hello, I'm Michelle Makori. We're here at the NASDAQ market site in New York's Times Square, and joining me now is Coleman Andrews, co-founding partner of Bain Capital and the Chief Investment Officer and CEO of Private Credit Specialists, RMWC. Coleman, nice to have you here in New York with us.
Michelle, good to be with you again. Thanks.
Now, Coleman, you have had a very impressive career of achievement and success over the years. And what struck me was the company that you keep. You're associated with President Ford, former South African President Nelson Mandela, my former president, and Governor Mitt Romney, and now Senator. Let's talk about Mitt Romney. Let's start off with the latter. I see you wearing the Romney tie. How is it that you co-founded Bain with Romney?
Mitt and I go back quite a ways. He actually recruited me to join Bain & Company when it was a small, little-known Boston-based consulting firm. We worked together as partners for a number of years, and along the way, informally, we led a couple of investments done mainly by the partners of Bain & Company. They worked out very well, pretty quickly, and based on our ridiculously short track record of 2 transactions, we decided together that we were pretty good at this. And we went and talked to Bill Bain and said we'd like to put together a strategy to build a business around this. It wasn't even called private equity back then, and he supported us in doing that. So off we went and spent about a half year designing the strategy, and then really struggled to raise our first fund. It took us a year to raise about $36 million for our first fund. A number of the folks we talked to said, well, come back to us when you've done 100 transactions, not just 2. But worked out pretty well. He's a first-rate individual.
What was your main takeaway from that experience?
The main takeaway was wherever possible, align yourself with people of high character and high competence. Bain & Company and Bain Capital from the beginning, they were some extraordinarily talented people, and I ended up with an appreciation that first and foremost focus on human capital. Financial capital can move anywhere in the world in the press of a button. Physical assets are obtainable, but human capital is really at the core of excellence in business and in many things in life. And Mitt was a great example and a great leader in that regard.
Well, you can't really get much higher in terms of human capital than South Africa's former president,
Absolutely not.
Nelson Mandela, and Nobel Prize winner as well. Now, you joined him in the late 90s to help turn around South African Airways, which was facing several challenges at the time. How did that happen?
As a South African, you remember
know,
that
yeah.
well, yeah. I got a call on Christmas Eve as I was driving to a dinner in Virginia from the representative of the South African government describing to me that they were in the middle of a global search for a CEO to turn around their principal national asset and then to privatize it. And at the end of the conversation, which stretched on for about a half an hour, I remember hanging up and thinking, this could be an extraordinary possibility, a complicated, fascinating strategy challenge, and doing that while working under the tutelage of one of my great heroes, Nelson Mandela. It was too hard to pass up.
What was it like working with him?
I remember most, he was kind enough to invite me to bring my children to his home on a Saturday. And we spent, the kids at the time were 19, 16, and 9. And we spent about 5 hours together. And he was, throughout that time, completely immersed in our visit together. No phone calls, no interruptions. And he'd taken the time to learn a little bit about each of my kids, and he made it clear to them how much he welcomed them there. And then after lunch, he had my youngster sitting on his knee at his dining room table at the house in Houghton. And he let me ask him some questions that I was hoping he would answer in front of the children. And it was just a breathtaking moment. And it changed the trajectory of my children's lives. All 3 of them really ended up focused on lives of service because of their interaction with him. That's what I remember most.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing experience for your children. And whilst you were, well, towards the latter years of your childhood, certainly very young, you were appointed by President Ford to serve on the White House Economic Advisory Committee?
I lived in fear of being asked day to day by people, exactly how old are you and how long have you worked here at the White House?
How old were you?
I was 21
Amazing.
When first hired. And I applied for, at the encouragement of my mentor at Dartmouth, I applied for a White House internship and there were 1,100 applicants, and I thought that'll be the last I hear of that. And then, surprisingly, was offered the position and assigned to the Economic Policy Board. Worked there for the summer after my junior year, and at the end of that time, they offered me a permanent staff position. So I had to finish college while working full-time there, and never really went back to spend that time on campus. It was quite a journey.
But you made another interesting choice, and that is to go to the Gulf War. You volunteered as a civilian, and you in fact awarded the Civilian Desert Shield Desert Storm Air Medal by the U.S. Air Force. How would you say your background in the military impacts your investment approach?
Well, at the time in the Gulf War, and I was a civilian volunteer for the Air Force, and the team that I led flew over 500 missions in the Gulf in that time frame. And it left me with two very important lessons. One is that you have to prepare for the broad range of possibilities that you might confront. And the second was learning to stay calm in the face of absolute chaos and danger. And both of those things, well, maybe not danger on the investing side, but
it depends.
to prepare for the range of possible outcomes that an investment might experience, and to stay calm in the midst of turmoil and upset and chaos. Those are lessons that have been very applicable, actually quite applicable in the last 2 or 3 months as the markets have been quite volatile.
Yeah. You really have a long record of service. Why is this such a passion for you?
You know, for a number of the years of my life, I think my focus was primarily on achieving things and to some degree accumulating wealth. And there was always an emptiness around those two objectives. And I came to conclude several years ago that that's really not at least my purpose here. And that in fact my purpose is to serve and help and care for others, and whether it's teaching the children at my orphanage in Kenya, loving them, caring for them, making sure that their futures are brighter than they might otherwise be, or working with military veterans of combat, a number of whom are severely affected by that combat experience. I have found that the greatest sense of fulfillment when I'm following my heart to those things which involve serving others.
So given you've had such a spectrum of experiences and you've met so many remarkable people, what would you say is the best pearl of wisdom, the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best advice I got was from actually a pastor that I got to know several years ago quite well. And he said, spend less time in your mind and more time in your heart, and then follow where your heart takes you. And it took me a bit to understand exactly what that meant, but that was really the pathway and the opening to more of a focus on service.
Thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
Great, thanks, Michelle.